Welcome everybody to Sustainable River Basin Management Module 5, Part 5, which is the final part of our course. Let's talk about approaches to sustainable river basin management. How can we actually implement it? What can we do? So we have to acknowledge that we can choose ways of implementing sustainability principles in our river basins. And we may move faster at some point, or we may take longer for some other steps, or we may have to take some steps more serious than maybe others. We have to identify what is important and what is feasible in our specific river basin and in our specific circumstances, and move continuously step by step to the sustainability principles. That progress depends on the area, the capacity, political will, the understanding of global connectivity of water issues, and not all of the river basins are equally equipped to move straightforward and fast and efficiently towards the sustainability principles. So we have to recognize that it's a process which will take time and is not equally implementable across one country or across regions. It has to be approached for each river basin individually and very specific, very targeted. So the suggested approach to this is structural and systemic modifications. We have talked about the systems thinking earlier and the requirements of these structural changes coming along with the systems changes. And we also have to make space for an adaptive, for an evolutionary implementation process. So what is said here is that there will be no overnight change happening, and also the results will probably not be measurable in a very short term. So it's a momentum, as with other major changes observed as examples earlier to you. Those process building, or the process building as such, is an adaptive process. That means that actions can start at any point in time and any location in a river basin, and should be split into smaller steps that can bring measurable impacts, which are predictable and can be presented as part of the success of the changes towards sustainable river basin management. There are several interventions that can be aligned to different time and spatial scales to accommodate, for instance, capacity building that will take time. People have to be trained, they have to learn new techniques, which will take years for them to achieve a final degree, for instance, and to bring their capacity, their knowledge to the active working environment. It will take even longer when we look into educational systems, starting with school children, where awareness and environmental education is built in, or will be built in. Local environmental contents be implemented in local curriculum, and which will have an impact on the capacity building process in institutions, as well as the technological changes taking place and the technologies which have to be accessible to institutions as part of the capacity building. So this is taking time, but has to be started at some point and has to be factored in as a contribution, as a very valuable contribution, adding its value to the entire process as it is moving on. There should also be a possibility to incorporate cooperation and integration efforts taking place. This is including new stakeholders, for instance, or new issues of land use which come up as river basin development is taking place and which have to be built into, it cannot be handled as a static process, and there should be a take-up of best practices taking place. It should also include the changes in values, the change of value, and the changes in water requirements taking place as water saving technologies may become available, water allocation principles are implemented, polluter pays principles become accepted and are implemented. So it's an adaptive process, we call this adaptation, that requires a frame which should be developed to give space for these various processes to take place. So there should also be a consensus building and stakeholder involvement from the beginning of the sustainability approach to a river basin to create a sense of ownership. And that sense of ownership is not with regard to the water resources as such or to the river basin as a geographical region. In this context, it is the sense of ownership towards implementing sustainability principles in this specific river basin. So that process as such requires people to understand and stakeholders to get involved and support it and have a sense of ownership of this process to be successful. In many cases, this is exactly the piece that is missing. All of these can be done and are done. There's money made available for capacity building, for scholarships, and so on. Training courses are taking place at large scale, and so on and so forth. New technologies are made available, low-cost technologies, and people are trained again, and so on. And still it's not taken up as such because it's not perceived as a part of the process of achieving sustainability in this river basin. So that is very important and should be at the forefront. So what are drivers of change in river basins? Human-related drivers of change such as economic, social and demographic functions, as well as climate change. Those are the drivers of change. So we have all of our dimensions, economic, social and demographic. In small also nature in itself is a driver of change, and then we have climate change accelerated through our human interventions. Those are our drivers of change. So the role of our river basin organizations or river basin managers is to understand and reassess how these human drivers of change affect the hydrology, how those drivers affect the water demand, and how ecosystem functions in the basin are affected due to, for instance, agriculture. If the agricultural priorities change, if the cropping, the types of crops change or the cropping pattern changes, if new technologies are implemented, irrigation, drip irrigation or flood irrigation, how this has its impact on the ecosystem's functions and so on. And this all has to be built into a strategy and a management plan. So it departs from an understanding and reassessment that has to take place as an ongoing process and be built into a working document that guides and puts and keeps all of the activities on a track and transparent. So the next step to this is performance monitoring. So that performance monitoring is done to assess the resources and health of a river basin on one side, and on the other side it is performance monitoring is conducted to assess developments, implementation and results. It's essentially assessing the performance of institutions. So one is a part of monitoring that we have discussed earlier, that we monitor our river basin, our hydrology, we monitor our polluters, and we monitor water quality and water quantities. This is one part of the performance monitoring. The other has to do with the actual institutions dealing with all of these aspects or influencing these aspects of the water availability, water quality, water supply, distribution, treatment in our river basin. We also have to identify new challenges, identify priorities, and have to use those and build them into so-called evaluation indicators, or you can also call them indicators of success. Those are target values which require knowledge of the system and must reflect what we want to measure here, what the performance is that we want to achieve, performance towards sustainable river basin management. So we have to define our indicators so that we exactly achieve an evaluation and assessment of those processes. And there must be mechanisms for self-assessment built into the performance monitoring. Now let's look into examples of planning and performance. We have here the initial situation, what this river basin organization highlighted as their performance indicators was cost recovery, the safety for irrigation, the safety for domestic and industry, in terms of water, the water quality in urban area, and environmental and river flows. What you can see here is that they were performing very well in terms of safety for domestic industries. They were performing less well in cost recovery and safety for irrigation, and at very low key on water quality and environmental and river flows. So this was at the beginning, and when we start implementing these sustainability, those changes towards sustainable river-based management, you would start from a baseline indicator set to measure your changes against that baseline. And then we have the result at this point, at a later stage of the implementation of this management plan. We have the same indicators here, and what we see is that overall the performance improved substantially in all of these visible in all of these performance indicators. There is a slight shift from the safety for domestic and industries, where the performance actually reduced, but at the same time water quality in urban rivers improved substantially, irrigation improved substantially, and full cost recovery was achieved in this specific case. And major improvements were achieved also with regard to the ecosystems services, with regard to environmental and river flows. So this is very a very good way of representing and transmitting the results, the successes from such interventions, from the implementation of these sustainability measures. Now, important is accountability of water services. So the river basin organization or river basin managers should have an obligation to inform public or stakeholders of the monitoring results of exactly such performance indicators. That would be one message, but not only. There should be information shared on water levels, water quality. Important are low flows, especially for farmers who use water for irrigation. There should be information shared on flood, early warning, etc. So this is part of the public information or stakeholder information which should be built into as part of accountability of water services. Also, as part of the accountability, there should be a reporting on the status of planning and management, a report on basin inventories in terms of what is available, what type of infrastructure do we have, what is working, what is not working in terms of water infrastructure, and how does it affect the stakeholders. Any changes in the water resources in the river basin should be reported to the stakeholders, and vice versa. If stakeholders notice any of these changes, then also they should have a possibility to report and inform the river basin managers. So this is part of accountability of water services. So what are the key components of sustainable river basin management now? Well, and this is in order, so starting from one, that should be the first priority of sustainable river basin management. There should be a good knowledge of the natural resources present in the basin. So the foundation is our hydrological budget, our water budget in the river basin. Then at the second stage or second priority is political will and commitment to implement sustainable river basin management. The third is that we need a well-defined, flexible and enforceable legal framework and regulation. So we have seen an example from the European Union with a very demanding, very ambitious legal framework. Important is that it is well-defined, flexible and enforceable, and has to be available for that specific river basin, or has to be developed if it doesn't exist. The fourth place, we have the need for adequate investment. There must be financial stability and sustainable cost recovery. Very important. And then we need a basin management plan and clear vision at the last stage, which is an implementing instrument, a tool. We usually envisage a management plan to be a report, a piece of paper, but it should be considered as a tool that helps us work through the implementation and realization of our vision. That basin management plan has to have inbuilt capacity development. It should also include participation and coordination mechanisms, and it should foster information sharing and exchange. There should also be attached to that basin management plan water allocation plan and a comprehensive monitoring and evaluation plan. Now, that evolution and adaptation process can be supported and can be made successful through a number of ways. One of them is to refer to best practice examples, to dig up what has been achieved in similar river basins, in similar climatic regions, in similar political frameworks. What were successful best practice examples? Also, a good move towards achieving that that switch to sustainable river basin management is to develop toolkits of how to set up a plan, how to make a strategy, how to identify stakeholders, how to build an inventory of the polluters of our river basin, and so on. For that, toolkits are available or can be adopted or developed specifically for the case. There should be a sector need analysis be done, and there should be actions that suit these individual sectors. Agriculture has different requirements than industries and so on. So those should be analyzed, and in some of this there should be targeted, tailor-made actions towards these individual sectors, although we have to perceive that all of them are using the same river basin and have to be budgeted into the available resources based on our hydrology and our water budgets. What also is a good step to do towards a successful sustainable river basin management is to identify hotspots. Hotspots would be areas, geographical areas where some burning issues occur, where maybe most of the industries are concentrated, or where major environmental degradation has taken place. Hotspots could also be positive examples which could be used to trigger and exemplify how actions could be implemented in other parts of the river basin. So hotspots could be positive or negative in this. Then we have to work on our river basin as a system. So we have to identify traps in our institutional framework, in our interventions. We have to identify positive feedback loops. They are very important because being positive, they should be reinforced, and priority should be given in terms of resources to enhance and stabilize these positive feedback loops. And lastly, it is important to align to our global benchmarks. And I mean with the global benchmarks, what the legal frame is of the country, but also the globally agreed benchmarks such as the coming up Sustainable Development Goals or still active Millennium Development Goals. So those are useful benchmarks which can serve as a more a global to allow global comparison of the implemented efforts at a local scale. Now, I suggest you to really look for encouraging examples. There are examples of river basins like the Clover-Volta basin, the example of the Danube River that I showed you earlier, but you can find many more. I would also suggest you to look to see the documentary called Lost Rivers, which is about river basins, river catchments placed and located below today's urban spaces. And that documentary shows specifically successful initiatives of the river restoration, the restoration of natural ecosystems, processes and functions and services in these urban spaces. So please look for more examples which you may take as a starting point to draft a strategy for your own river basin. With this, I'm closing the course. I thank you for your interest in the course, and I hope that I was able to answer many of the questions which you had when we started, and I hope that I was able to keep your interest in the water resources management subject as a whole, and that you will introduce new methods, new thoughts towards sustainable river basin management wherever you are in your professional field. Thank you for your attention.